Okay, very excited to have David on the show. David, thanks for coming.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, David, before we get into talking about this experience that you had, could you just tell us a little bit about who you were before you had this experience?
Before this experience, I'm an attorney by trade, and I live now for about 20 years in Arizona. But I'm an East Coast guy. Grew up in the East Coast, Philadelphia, New York. Went to school, law school, and started practicing different kinds of law, ending up in commercial litigation, trial work, and was really sort of very unsatisfied with the law. And I had an opportunity at that time, after about 10 years of practice, to make a jump, make really a wholesale life change. And I had an opportunity to get into something outside of law with some family. And that was a business opportunity and allowed us to make this really big move. And that really took me through a lot of trials and tribulations and unforeseen life turns, which ultimately led me to a really difficult situation and then ultimately to plant medicine, which is what my current focus is in today.
Amazing. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, what was this difficult situation? This is the lawsuit you're referring to, right?
Yeah. So when I came to Arizona, I came out here like, I'm an attorney by nature, right? So I'm generally mostly conservative and I'm logical. I think things out. And so I had an opportunity for with an existing business that was being run by family, and so it looked like a very secure place to go into, and it actually was. But if people will recall, this was just right before the major world financial collapse in 2008. And at that time, everything sort of collapsed. All the credit markets dried up. I was doing credit card processing services. So a lot of that relied on new businesses, which there were none of anymore. People weren't leasing the equipment we were selling at that time. So everything kind of shut off in a hurry. And we were kind of scrambling left to figure out what that outlet was and sort of the next alternative, how to replace the business. And we actually did find a really interesting novel solution. But over the next year and a half, we discovered that some of the businesses we were dealing with were not acting ethically in terms of the um, uh, agents essentially that they were signing on and referring us to in our business. And so we started to see some of that pushback. And I tried to address that. But unbeknownst to me, it became a very big case. I mean, we had about 50,000 agents on our books that were signed up to sign our services. I had 100 direct employees in our office in a 50,000 square foot facility outside of Phoenix here. And one day that all came crashing down. And the government came in. They didn't shut our business down, but they essentially made it impractical to continue. And all the employees, everything basically just became inoperable almost overnight. And they sued me for $79 million. dollars.
The state sued you, the government.
Yes, correct, correct. And that was, an absolute. I never had any experience like that as an attorney. Of course, it was a lot more surprising. I had not anticipated this. We had actually tried when I knew there was kind of inklings about a case that was coming to try to head it off at the pass, talk to the government, go in there, invite them into our business to let them know what they might be thinking was not at all exactly what was going on. Please come in. We'll open up everything to you. Let's make sure we get on the same page. And then some months went by before the actual lawsuit, and I thought we were in a good place. But really, what was happening was they were just taking steps to finalize the lawsuit, get everything into place, and really kind of drop the hammer on us. And that's ultimately what they did in April of 2010. And so from that point, my life was kind of in a downhill like spiral where I really became kind of toxic. Nobody knows what's going on in the business. No one really knows the truth about anything that happens. These are the kinds of these situations when they take place. This is what happens. And you see certain news reports that come out and really nobody knows anything. And now I'm left with no business, no real way to get back into a business. And on top of which, I'm dealing with a $79 million lawsuit from the state government which has unlimited power, unlimited finances, and they were just dead set on coming after me and some family and business partners. And so
Do
that,
you
yeah,
remember? Sorry to interrupt, but
no,
do you remember
please.
the moment, the actual moment? How did they inform you? This is like you received a letter, or someone came to see you. How did you actually find out?
It's a great question. I was on my way to the office and I got a call from someone that said, "Do not come in." Why shouldn't I come in? There are government people all over the place. They're talking to people, they're doing interviews, and they're taking, computers and things like that. And so this process, and it's a very interesting legal process that in the United States is known, but not really by a lot of the population, which is um, asset forfeiture, is this what it's called? And it's a civil procedure that state governments and federal governments are allowed to partake in, where they can essentially get court orders without any lawsuit filed, without any adversarial process, no chance to respond or defend yourself, where basically they can seize your assets. They can seize physical assets, they seize real property, real estate, and and finances, your bank accounts, every account you have, regardless of the source of it, regardless of, well, these accounts were open for 20 years. These were funds that were given to me by my grandfather. So none of that really matters. Legally, of course, it's very pertinent, but as a practical matter, these things are totally overlooked. And the government can come in and shut your lights off in 1 second. And that's really what happened. I'm basically, okay, let me turn my car around. I don't even know where I'm going. And it just got progressively worse from there. The good news is that I had been working with a very high level attorney on the business side to make sure everything was being done properly. And when we got notice that there was maybe a pending investigation going on, we tried to take proactive steps to, again, go into the government and say, "Hey guys, let's have a conversation," which I ultimately did. I said, "You can ask me anything you want. You can record anything you want. There's nothing that's off limits. This is not something that is at all typically done when you know that you're being looked at by the government." But we were so confident in what was going on that we invited this process in and tried to head it off. I was obviously unsuccessful. So it was like anybody who knows that you go through something that's life changing, that where your life can change in an absolute instant. And this is what that was. And that instant led to a battle over a 6.5 year period before this case was ultimately dismissed. And dismissed with no adverse consequences to me. I didn't owe one penny of the $79 million. I had to sign a release so that I wouldn't sue the government to go after them for any claims. And I got my assets back and I got my money back. And it was basically, okay, you're allowed to go on and go live your life, and no harm, no foul. But anyone who's been through something like this knows that, they were threatening to charge me criminally over the years. And sometimes a year would go by and you wouldn't hear anything. And then they would come back and I would get a call from my attorney saying, "Well, they're ramping up the investigation again and I think they're going to charge you." And so you live in this sort of fight or flight war mentality. And I liken it in a crude way. And I don't want to offend anyone by saying this, but it's like terrorism, where you don't know what's happening today or tomorrow. You don't know if someone's coming for you in the morning. You just have no idea. And so even when big swaths of time would go by when nothing would happen, I would still be living in that fear mentality, because they would come back again, and you have every reason to believe that they're going to do what they say. Of course, they never did what they said they were going to do. They never even took steps to really move the case along in terms of the normal discovery that you would anticipate in a litigation, where there's paper discovery and there's depositions and all the things that you need to get a case to go to trial. It was clear from the beginning that they never had any intention to do any of this. That typically they were just relying on a tried and true process where if they don't like a business someone is in, they can just go take their money. They can take their assets, which basically forecloses any ability to put up a fight. Because what's the first thing that a lawyer is going to ask you when they look at a complaint where you've been sued for $79 million? This is a major case, right? My legal fees ended up to be in the seven figures, like over $1 million. And how do you pay for that when the government has then taken your money? And when your first answer is, well, we really don't have any ability to do that right now. What do you think? The attorney says, well, I'm sorry, I can't help you. The
Mm.
miracle that happened to me is that because I had been working with this attorney in advance of this situation, and we had paid substantial fees, we were a substantial corporate client. Um, they were able to stay on, and my lead attorney, who is now on my board of directors, actually saved my life. And it's an example as an attorney now where I've seen this firsthand, where an attorney can actually stand between the government and the individual and actually hold them at bay. And even though nothing really transpired in the case, as I'm saying, the fact that he was there as the representative really didn't allow the government to take that final last step and put the nail in the coffin, so to speak. And so after a couple years would go by. So after administrations in the government would actually change two times. So we were on the third administration who came into this case, and we still have no idea what changed the government outlook. But ultimately, they decided one day that we're not. They saw the case for what it was, and they had no interest in continuing this anymore. And we were then trying to actually push it at that point. If you're going to bring this case, then let's go and bring it. And there was recent Supreme Court case law that said you cannot take people's money and other assets unless you can show directly that they resulted from the activity that you were alleging was part of this case. And they absolutely had no way to show any of that. I don't know if what really the direct motivation was, but in about June of 2016, about 6.5 years or so after this happened, the case was dismissed and we were able to get it resolved. What that left me with, though, was like a situation where people who have been like attacked, I say like a bear. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing that the bear has left you, but what you
Mm.
are left with are lifelong scars and injuries and mental trauma that simply just does not go away.
Of course.
And I really wasn't looking at that in a particular way until a couple of friends of mine approached me with this thing called ayahuasca. Have you ever heard about what that is? And I said, no. And just to give a little context, I had never tried a psychedelic substance in my life before ayahuasca in 2017. So, about 6 months after this case was resolved, my friends approached me with this, and we considered it for, it took a few months actually, but we decided to do it. And I was then told in this process, you come in with an intention, there's a preparation. What is it that you would like to see from this experience? And since I had no framework or a reference to know what a psychedelic journey was going to be like, especially ayahuasca, which is very physically taxing, I just started to focus on what my intention was. And what I realized was that I was left with this very heavy resentment, very heavy anger toward the people that I saw were responsible for bringing this situation. And I realized, that that was hurting me. And I didn't realize until my ceremony exactly how badly that was and how badly it was affecting me. But I was hoping that I would go in and have that addressed. And fortunately, that's exactly what happened. So we went down to the desert. Really, it was outdoors, like after the winter. This is February, but still very cold. And people know the desert can be a very extreme climate. So we go, and you're in a GPS coordinate. Like there's nothing around except a makeshift structure that about 15 people would be able to sit around a circle with like a fire source in it. And then the ceremony is led by a shaman who is trained in the traditional medicine and how to serve it. And there's a lot of chanting and singing that is very traditional that goes part and parcel with the ayahuasca journey. And then there's a number of facilitators there who help everybody along in the process. And that was my first entree. So you go up, you take a cup, and you drink. You go back to your mat essentially, and you sort of wait for things to happen. And
Could you describe the taste for anybody who's not tried ayahuasca?
yeah, the taste is horrible.
Yeah.
It's like you, I mean, I use some very, very descriptive terms when people ask me that. I don't know that it's appropriate that I go into that
Go
much
ahead. Go ahead,
description,
please.
but I feel like it's if you took like, it's like a sludge that was like
Yeah.
filtered through the ass of a rhinoceros. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, it's just bad. Sometimes like they'll give you like a grape or a little fruit, something that you could just
A
put in your mouth,
lime or some ginger or something, right?
something
Something
like that.
fragrant.
Yeah, to cover the taste. But look, it's not terrible. You get it down fast. It's nothing you're trying to savor. And I actually took, 2 cups, which a lot is very traditional. Also, maybe like an hour later, there will be a
Mhm.
bell for those who are called, which I think is most people will go up and have that second cup. And it's up
Mm.
to the individual. How are you feeling? Going through the process and so forth. Um, and so I took the second cup, and after that, I started the purge, which people who know a little bit about it is like you kind of start throwing up a little bit.
Mm.
So these are like the purge, though it's not like a sickness. It feels like that essentially at the beginning, but you're not unwell, you're not ill. What you're doing really is purging a lot of toxicity. And the body and the mind and the spirit, as I have come to learn on this magnificent journey, are inextricably tied together. And so, what you're going through mentally will show up in the physical body. And so, when you are treating yourself for this kind of anguish, you're going through ayahuasca. Your body and your nervous system will process all of the stress and the fear and the sometimes and the anger, and that's what I was feeling that was sort of leaving my body at the time. And so it's a limited in duration. You kind of have this purge for a little while, and the people that run these ceremonies are just so wonderful. And I think that's worth saying. There's so much love and caring and support. Now, you certainly have to find the right a group and the right shaman to conduct an ayahuasca ceremony in particular. And so, but these are all over the place now for people all over the world, all throughout the states now. It's much different than it was 10 years ago. And so, just to digress for a second, like these things are out there for people, and a lot of them are not really expensive. So, there's healing out there that's very attainable. And
Mm.
so, we went through this. I took the second cup, I had the purge, and then things started to settle down. And I had this vision that you will get in ayahuasca, and I say these things are sort of like daydreams, if you will. And so you can ask yourself, am I having this daydream? Is this a hallucination? And these are all kind of fair questions. I think that there's something going on that is far beyond our capability to understand and process. But
Mhm.
if you're just accepting of the situation and the process of what's going on, I just kind of released myself to that. And essentially, I came head to head, almost like in a trio, if you would, like almost like very close with the 2 people that were really the face of the government in this case. And I could actually feel the pain that they were going through on an individual basis, the suffering that they were feeling in their own lives, which I understood allowed them to participate in this case and likely other cases. That enabled them to put themselves in a mindset where they could actually bring these cases against people. Now, I don't want to say that I'm a completely innocent person, that I have no responsibility for anything that happened. I'm beginning to talk about this case in detail. It's a very interesting case. Going into the weeds of that isn't really appropriate, for what our talk today, because we're talking about how I kind of
Mm.
came out of it. But that it is something I am getting into, and I would like to pursue, in real detail, where these conversations are appropriate. So I'm not looking to divest myself from any and all blame. Like they didn't pick me out of my business out of a phone book, right? Like there were things that were happening. There were millions of dollars in business transactions that were going on, and they truthfully didn't really know really the beginning of. I mean, they really hardly knew anything. It was mind blowing how little they actually did know, and that's very typical of government bureaucracies. even in these very high detailed cases. And I think a lot of that is because they know and they have experience that when they bring a case like this, they don't really have to have a case because they already get a court order. They can take everything you have at the beginning. And so whatever the truth was or wasn't is essentially irrelevant because they're never going to see you again because you're essentially gone, dead, and buried. Like they just drop a major bomb on you. In this case, I didn't go away because I had the support of an attorney. And that really proved to make the difference and ultimately won the day for us, albeit 6+ years later. But as I'm going through this, ceremony, I realize, okay, these are what these people are doing. But instead of feeling the normal anger and the resentment and the just vile hatred that I had built up over years for what these people were doing to me and to my family, I felt compassion. I felt compassion for them because of their pain. And what I was going through was no longer relevant. And this is the magic of ayahuasca, the magic of psychedelics, I would say even more generally, different medicines, different compounds, which is it allows you to take a distanced position outside of your normal ego responses where you would just want to go back at someone and respond and retaliate and revenge and say to yourself, I see why you hurt me because you're also in pain. And I'm sorry for the pain that you're going through. And I will be fine because I have come through this process. And if I have learned anything, is wow, look how strong I have become, that I have been able to survive this. Now, it certainly wasn't on my own, and I certainly had tremendous help and unseen miracles that were happening at the time, which are very difficult to see when you're going through a very difficult period in your life. And that's one thing I talk about on my channel is sometimes the miracles that happen are difficult to see when you're in the middle of a storm. But I was able to step away from this and then and feel this compassion and then be unburdened by the anger that I was carrying with me that I saw then was only weighing me down, and it had no impact on the people that I was angry at, none. And so it seems so illogical and so simple that that is just not something that one would want to do because it just makes no sense. But it took the ayahuasca ceremony to give me that newfound perspective to be able to evaluate the situation in this new way. And so when I left, I felt physically like I had been relieved so much to the point that I would look down at my feet thinking that I was not even walking on the ground anymore. I felt like I was like walking on one of those airport like walkways that are just like moving under your feet where it doesn't take much effort and you're just like floating. And it was a magnificent feeling. And that was, my peace was restored. And I knew that I had the ability then to take these lessons and apply them to future situations. And kind of that was the start of me building my toolbox, where I had this unbelievable revelation. And then over the years, I've been able to learn from that and gradually incorporate these lessons and then other lessons and other medicines and other journeys and experiences into my own experience and then ultimately meld this into my current life path on a personal and business level, and so this is now what I'm doing today is to bring these lessons to people who are awakening, who are similarly questioning whatever their backgrounds are, that plant medicine may be the solution for you. And more people are waking up to this reality now every day.
Wow. That was a
Yeah,
really interesting story, really
yeah,
beautifully told as well.
yeah.
So many things I want to ask you about. I guess the first is do you feel this whole legal situation was traumatic? And if so, do you feel that in spite of the healing process you've gone through, do you still feel on some level or on any level kind of traumatized by that experience?
Yes, I would say like the that doesn't go away to some level, but after all this time, I've been able to process it to such an extent that I can look at it without it having the effect that it had on me in those beginning years, from the time it happened until I really learned in the medicine how to deal with that and how it then ultimately changed me. And so I think more generally, I look at trauma situations and past situations, past anger, and current situations that happen. And it has given me the ability to take the emotion, if you will, out of it, where I can look at situations, look at people that continue to do things that I don't approve of or do things that I think are wrong, that are wrong to me. But instead of having the anger, I realize, listen, these people are suffering too. And suffering people, people that are hurt, also tend to hurt people. This is very commonly known. And so rather than get caught up in my responding from an emotional standpoint, I kind of use the trauma to say, I've survived this. I've become stronger. So I no longer have to have the same visceral emotional reactions that I used to. And so that's, again, part of the toolbox that I use to bring to my life today and try to use that in every situation. Now, I still fall back into old patterns. And so that's something I think is very important to say. These are not like magical cure alls that will fix you, in a sense, forever. That's not the case. What does happen is you get a perspective where you realize,
Yeah.
if I'm doing that thing that I always used to do and I'm falling back into that old pattern, now at least I can, one, recognize it, and then two, have the fortitude to say, I not only recognize it, but I'm going to make a change. And I have a toolbox at my disposal that I've built over the years to be able to go into it and say, let me pick this one out because this one's appropriate, and let me make the change and stop doing that old thing, that old pattern. And so it's not about perfection. It's about trying to improve yourself. And there's no race here. There's no a contest, and you're in a race of one, if you will. It's all about you as the individual without comparing yourself to anybody else. That's a big fallacy. It's a big illusion. This is what we're all here to overcome, is that we're all on our own journey. Yes, we're doing it together, and we have friends and family, and you have to interact with people in the world. Of course you do. But in terms of what your road is, that's an individual thing. So it's given me the ability to handle these things in a much better way, like trauma, so that it doesn't affect me and other people in the same way that they may have before, medicine.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think perspective's the exact right way to put it, isn't it? Because they don't chemically alter you. They don't change you. They show you something and they give you the option to change. They show you other possibilities, and then you now can see these other possibilities and you can make different choices in how you think and feel, which
exactly
is, I
right.
think, what's cool
It's
about
all
it.
about it's all about choices. Some people come out, they fall back into old patterns, and they say, "Well, that ayahuasca or that psilocybin mushroom ceremony, that was really profound, even, but it really didn't change my life in any way, and now I'm kind of still waiting." Because it's you that has to actively make the change, and that on every
Mhm.
day you have to make the change. And we can wake up in the morning and realize that we're not the same person in any way that we actually were even yesterday. So you don't have to fall prey to this fallacy that things are not going to change. And the reason people experience the same kind of monotony and the slump, and unhappiness and frustration, is because you believe, you in general, right, that yesterday, today is not going to be any different than yesterday. And you've become excellent at recreating your reality to such a point that when today happens, you're 100% confident that tomorrow indeed will be the same. And you're 100% correct. It will be. And you don't realize that it's because you have the power. Now, there is this thing called delay, right? You can't snap your fingers and like change everything in a split second. Otherwise, life would be very easy. So there is this delay mechanism that's built in. So it's all about, learning how to address a negative situation, address it with peace, and then take some action, because we're in a world of this 3D environment of action. So you've got to actually do something. And if you do the something with a positive mindset And then you realize that all these things, even bad things, are temporary. You have outlived and survived all of these negative things in your life. Your record of survival is 100%. As an individual, you've overcome it. You can tell me whatever it is, but you're still here today. So you have won, man. You've done it. So you just have to do it with a little more grace, and that will help you be happier while things that are negative turn to positive, and your outlook on that negative thing will help make that change occur and bring more positivity into your life on a much more rapid basis, and you'll bring positive change into your life on a more regular and consistent basis. And that's really what all these lessons are. You can't control the waves that life is going to throw at you, but you can control how you're going to react. And people like to discount this because it's easy. Oh, this thing happened. This is bad. I don't deserve this. Why did this happen? They always get lucky. How come it never happens to me? And yada, yada. And that's the bad negative thinking that kind of keeps you in these sort of long lasting lulls and slumps, is because it's your own thinking that keeps you in that negative limited mindset. And it's the understanding that we can, with our own thoughts, influence our environment. We actually can. And if you stick to it enough, it's like it builds momentum, so that if, the good thing, if the bad thing is still in my life and it's not changing as quickly as I may want, just keep at it, because over time you will start to build that momentum and you will bring about that change. Nothing lasts forever. So these are like the general lessons that I'm bringing to people, to let them know that within you is so much power if you would only look at it and let it out. People don't realize how powerful they actually are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely. And you mentioned waves, the current, and I think that's kind of what I was thinking when you talked about that delay in change, because you can't get all the results of the change instantly, but you can kind of change the direction the sails of the ship are facing, and you begin heading in a different direction, and it takes time, but you can at least change your alignment and your direction,
That,
and
that,
that's
that's
that's the
right.
important thing.
And the other thing is to realize that sometimes the path that you thought you should have been on, or the thing that didn't happen to you that you really regret and feel badly about, how do you know that that was really the best path for you? How do you really know that that thing was the best outcome? Because when you surrender, and here's the other lesson: when you surrender to the universe, and if you're a religious person, you surrender to God or source, whatever it is that you want to call it. I bring, if you have a religious background, bring that on into plant medicine. There's no
Mhm.
conflict between religion and the medicines, and people don't realize how much of their traditional religions actually were tied directly to psychotropic substances. And
Yeah.
people are unaware of that because religion itself and governments have buried that, because they don't want you to have the power and the knowledge that the plant medicines actually unleash. So part of the trick is to say, I'm just going to be positive, and yes, I'm going to try to make that change and pick a direction here, but I'll be okay if that direction doesn't come to pass, because I know something better for me is out there. And so then in that perspective, no matter what happens, you're actually okay with it. And being okay is the goal. That's all that there is. Because again, you can't control everything, of course. So, but being okay with what happens, you've won the game. It's very
Yeah.
simple. Life is not that complicated.
Yeah,
This life.
yeah, God's plan or the universe's plan or fate or whatever you want to think of it as, but embracing that is powerful. One thing I want to go back to, because I think to the overwhelming majority of people listening, the idea of a $79 million lawsuit connected to all these businesses is quite abstract, and they can't really relate to that idea.
Yeah.
So, could you explain for you on a personal level at that time, what did that represent in terms of what the consequences would have been for your day-to-day life? Because obviously there's the business, right? The business is going to go under, the business is going to cough up all this money. What would that have meant for you as an individual in terms of
Well,
how your life would have changed?
yeah, I mean, look at it. Just imagine this. Let's say you were, um, let's just take the position that, because it resolved in my favor, right? Again, I don't want to get into the weeds here and say, oh, I'm an innocent person. There's certainly people that I don't want to position myself that way, but let's just, for argument's sake. So you're sued in a case that ultimately you have no responsibility for, right? But that's irrelevant. You wake up on a Tuesday morning and not only is your business gone and not only is your money gone, but you have no ability to gain other employment because the specter of this case is so massive that nobody really wants to work with you because, especially at the beginning, nobody knows what's going on. And so people don't want to be associated with anybody that they think is being targeted by the government because then they think that might, lead them to be targeted for some reason. And so people like to shun you, and then they judge you. I have lost friends. I had a very close friend, maybe the closest friend, who never ever talked to me again the day after this case was public. And when you fast forward years later and this case was dismissed and I had not been found responsible for anything, I didn't have to pay anything, I had no adverse consequences from it, and I lost a lifelong friendship over it, that is still something I am unable to process. But people in these situations, you will lose people, and all around you, you lose everything. How do you wake up in a day? And then, by the way, to realize also that on top of all this is your attorneys calling you saying, yeah, they might charge you. They're talking about charging you, and then a couple of years later, they come back and say they're offering you 4 years in prison.
Oof.
And you better take this, or else they're saying there are no more deals, and they're just going to throw the book at you, and they're going to come and they want to put you away for many years.
Did
I
you
mean,
consider taking the 4 years?
no. I can only say, and I had this discussion with it gets even crazier than that because it got to the point where, as time would go on, the threats would start to decrease in the sense that they would say, okay, the 4 years is off the table, but they're going to charge you with this. If you plead guilty to this, and these are like fraud related charges, if you plead guilty to this, you will lose your license, your license to practice law, but there will be no prison. And my attorney says, frankly, David, you're not going to survive prison. So my advice to you is that's has to be off the table. And I've arranged and offer a disposition where you will not have to go to prison. But the thought of me pleading guilty and lying and perjuring myself in a plea in open court, which by the way happens every day, and lose my license to practice law over something in my heart I knew I didn't do, even against the reality that I could go to prison and who knows what would happen. I could likely be killed, or who knows. I mean, people in any prison system, you know what they're like. Um, but something inside me said I just could not bring myself to say yes to it. And I got to the point where became so indignant about that I told my attorney, listen, I will not take a parking ticket. I will not. And I understand the logic in the legal advice that I'm getting for me to consider, but I just cannot do it. And so these are all the things that I've had to, process. And how do you tell a person you can't otherwise, other than if you've experienced something similar? Because there's so many things that are going on all at once. It's a storm. And the thing that I realized throughout the process was the one constant that I had was my wife and my family. And I have children and I had my health. And, if you've ever, people that are married, if, you give your vows and, the typical for better, for worse, whatever, your religion is, or whatever you say to your spouse during uh, your wedding, how much of that have really been tested from people? Like, do you know if your spouse is really going to be there when things are really at their worst? And I can say, coming through this situation, that I have been tested, and my wife stayed with me through anything, through everything. And I wake up knowing that I have a partner in my life that is the most unbelievable person that God has given to me and that I love and cherish. She's the most important thing in the world to me, along with my children, of course. And I had the most important things a person could have. They took everything from me, but the most important things that a person could have. And then I learned how to build from that. And I think if you have true love and true integrity and trust in your relationship, in your marriage, in your family, then you can do anything from there. So that's probably the most important lesson I've learned.
Right. And
Yep.
on the day when all of this was dismissed, were you able to just celebrate that? Was that a joyous experience, or were you still kind of angry, or what?
Well, it was mixed, right? I knew by that time. I mean, years had passed, right? 6 years had already passed. Excuse me. So, waking up into the daily sort of mess of that was something that became very natural to me. So, one of the other positive things when you go through a war-like situation is that you become strengthened. You develop an iron about you because this is just your reality. And so I've learned how to wake up and live in that. I've learned how to wake up and know that today someone could be coming for me. I figured that out over time. So when it ultimately resolved, I number one, I got money back, right? And so this was a time that I was continuing to struggle because as the case was going on, it's years and years, and it's hard for anybody under any circumstances to be successful, right? That's success is hard, business is hard, even if you don't have anything really holding you back. There are just so many challenges and things that can happen. So it was positive in the sense that I didn't have to think about this case anymore. It was over. I didn't have to pay lawyers anymore. I figured out how to do that or worry about how I was going to juggle that. I didn't have to worry about that, they were threatening me anymore. And I actually had some money back. But on top of that, I don't think it was a celebration, right? Because there was a realization that, this is the way it should have been from the beginning. And I still have the same challenges left, the next day. Like I've still got to pick myself up and figure out what it is I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. It did ultimately become easier because I was able to point to the resolution and to say, hey, look, there's a lot of context to this that I think is very important to discuss. And again, I'm not an angel, and I'm not saying I didn't have any responsibility in this, and I'm a victim. I don't say any of that. So I was able to then be able to kind of look at it and address that now being outside, on the other side of a major case like this. So it definitely brought me relief. But I wouldn't say it was a celebration. It was just an understanding that, life goes on, but having said that, if the worst situation in my life didn't happen, I would not be exactly where I am right now. And I mean exactly where I am. So I would say that I'm grateful for the worst thing that's ever happened to me because look at the lessons that it has shown to me. Look at what it has shown, in terms of my marriage and my relationship and my family. Look at the wonderful things that I've been able to see that have come out of it. And now it's led me directly into the plant medicine space, which before ayahuasca was something I never ever would have considered. It was just not a part of who I was. So I'm fundamentally a different person and really changed, like from any way you want to ask that. And I go about my life like a completely changed person. So, you're an amalgamation of everything that's happened to you in life, and that's no different for me. So, I'm really happy now to get into the juice and the context of all of that because it's a very interesting story and it makes for a very interesting life. And these experiences now that I'm having and looking to open up to people is just an amazing path for me, and I'm grateful for it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear a lot about blessings in disguise from people. The worst things that happen to you in your life end up being the best. Like the last interview I did on this channel, it was a woman who was hit by a car and almost killed, lost, you couldn't walk and everything, and then she discovered photography, which became like her passion in life. But there are these blessings in disguise that happen completely outside of your control, and then there are ones like she had and like what you're describing, where it's not just fate, but you also made the choice, right? Because when your friend had mentioned ayahuasca, you could have said, no, 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 I'm not doing that. I'm not interested in that. That's weird. It's crazy. And you wouldn't be in the position you're in. So it's also, if you adapt and you make the right choices and you're open minded, then terrible things can become blessings in
Yeah.
disguise.
And it really begs the question about whether and to how much and what extent things are predestined. Because had I not made that choice, would I have been confronted with plant medicine in another way? And what would be responsible for putting those choices to us, to me? In other words, is it not completely random? Are there things that are set out for us that maybe we prearrange before we incarnate into this body that we experience life in? These are now questions that I continue to ask on a very deep level in terms of consciousness expansion. Do we have? And I've had psychedelic experiences where I have been shown my life program. This is your program. This is what you set up for yourself. Now, that doesn't mean that everything I decide to do or not decide to do is not up to my free will. But I think it is a sort of a joint effort between a plan that you set out and your choice in life about whether you want to address these things and how you would like to respond. So these are kind of the challenges that you're set up for in life. How do you want to handle those? And sometimes people address them and handle them well and they learn from them. Sometimes they don't. Maybe they have to reincarnate again and come back and learn those lessons again. I don't have answers to any of these questions, but I have experience that has led me to asking these and other very deep questions. I don't think we're meant to know the answers, certainly not all of them. And I don't know that it's even that important that we know the answers. Again, it's just
Mm-hmm.
about what can I do today as a human, because that's what I am now. I believe that, we're spiritual beings having this human experience. But the human experience is so vitally important and precious. And so we don't want to do anything to take away from this magnificent experience. And so, as a soul being, when you're timeless and things are just totally without limitation, you don't have an environment for learning. But when you're in this 3D and you have significant limitation, but look at the miracles. You can experience time from which you can learn patience and wisdom. You experience wonderful foods. You experience love. You experience physical touch. You experience the world and the beautiful flowers and taking a walk, going out with your dog, throwing a ball. All of these wonderful human things that, at their essence, are the actual point of living. These are not mundane things that happen. You can experience unbelievable, unlimited gratitude just by sitting out in nature, having a cup of coffee. If you can appreciate the miracle that you're able to do that in a human body, then you're well on your way. It's just experiencing the moment of presence, which is something thematically that I come back to very frequently. We had all of this is an illusion. All we have is the actual present moment that we're existing in right now. It's just moment to moment to moment. Once we start thinking about the past, thinking about the future, we get pulled, and you get pulled out of the present. And that's the actual thing that is the only thing that's important. It's the present moment and love. That's all we're here to figure out is love, how to bring love to people, how to be loved, and how to spread this love to everybody in the world. And this will address all of the things that are happening in the world in terms of violence and all political strain and hatred and resentment and all the different flavors and forms it takes. We're here to overcome these parts about ourselves and to understand that we are all the same. Ultimately, we come from the same source, and that we're in this together, floating on this crazy rock in these meat suits that we call bodies, and we have no idea why or how we got here or what our purpose is. And It's actually a lot simpler than I think we complicate things with. I've got to go get the job. I've got to make more money. I don't have this. I want to buy that thing, and these are all great things to do while you're a human. But I think it's important that you take time out of your day, whether that's a meditation or whatever your practice, and it doesn't have to be plant medicines, but to just express gratitude. Express gratitude that you woke up this morning. Because if you woke up this morning and you have to go to a crappy job and you have to get on the bus or the subway in New York City, which I did for a long time, and you're just angry and you've got to go and you're not making the money at this job you don't want to go to, these are the things that take away, these are the illusion. But if you have legs, like go talk about your past guest, right? She was hurt, and like sometimes these people are paralyzed. That's it forever. That's it. I can't walk anymore. If you could appreciate the fact that you could walk today, which is something a lot of us mostly overlook, how happy would you be? Because if you were not that person, nothing would matter except that you had no legs.
Yeah.
But now that you have them, you take it for granted. So again, this is not to knock ourselves, but it's to understand that we can simplify things to what is really important. We will always be distracted because we're human and we like these things and we want to buy those things and we're on social media and we have jealousies because we see people that have things and we want those things. Those are all normal. Like, don't beat yourself up about being a human, but just put it into context and realize, wait, this is kind of my human thing. And no matter whatever I accumulate in my life, and if I become rich, you're not taking any of that with you. I mean, none of it, right? It's all gone. It's going to somebody else. There's nothing about that will have any longevity, no survivability. So, enjoy things. I say that all the time. I love material things, but focus on what's important and take those moments however you want to observe that practice, and it will serve you.
Yeah. Beautifully explained. Again, David, you speak so well about this stuff. I think that's a fantastic note to end on, and I'm going to pop a link in the description for your YouTube channel where you talk about stuff like this, right? I've not checked it out, but I assume it's generally related to
Yeah.
ayahuasca and
Well, yeah, I talk about ayahuasca. I talk about psilocybin. I talk about LSD. I talk about dimethyltryptamine, DMT. There's a lot of experimentation that is going on all over the world, actually, with psychedelics now to treat people with depression, and then consciousness expansion. What is this world about? The physical reality? Do we live in the matrix? All of these things. So I talk about what are the different medicines like? What are the experiences like? And then again, like we're talking, what have I learned from them? So I talk about, well, this experience taught me this one taught me that, and this is how I think it can help you and other people that are considering, is this right for me? And I think undoubtedly in the world, especially in the United States and across the world, we're moving back into a psychedelic renaissance where people are learning that these medicines that are there for them to really help them. And this is my path to bring this message to as many people as I can.
amazing. Okay, great. All right, David, that's brilliant. I think people will be really interested to check that out. Thanks so much for sharing all of this, and take care.
Yeah, thank you.